Chapter 681. Tanya, Shen Feiying, and the rest had completely surrounded the dilapidated temple. Looking at Fang Yun in the dilapidated temple, Shen Feiying felt a little emotional. Fang Yun had called him godfather since he was born, and he had called him that for 20 years. Now he had to kill him personally. Shen Feiying did not regret betraying Fang Datong. However, facing Fang Yun, Fang Datong really felt a little guilty. However, no matter how guilty he felt, Shen Feiying knew that killing Fang Yun would affect his future. Now that he had killed his elder brother and colluded with the suppression hall to seize the giant spirit gang, he could no longer turn back. Pushing open the door of the dilapidated temple, Shen Feiying said coldly, "Chen Hu, I didn't realize it before, but your acting skills are pretty good." Chen Hu's face showed a trace of sadness. "What's the use of acting skills? In the end, I was still fooled by you and became a tool to suppress the Northern Yen martial arts. I, Chen Hu, have not let down the giant spirit gang, but I have let down the entire Northern Yen martial arts community." Shen Feiying sneered. Tanya said faintly, "Who can you blame for your own stupidity?" Hearing this, Chen Hu's blood rushed to his heart, and he actually spat out a mouthful of blood. Tanya raised his eyebrows and said, "Yo, so petty. TSK, with this kind of mind, you still want to learn how to act. Gang leader Shen, this is the internal affairs of the giant spirit gang. I won't interfere." Shen Feiying looked at Fang Yun and sighed. "Fang Yun, don't blame me. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame yourself for being Fang Datong's son. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame Chen Hu for taking you away. If you had obediently stayed in the giant spirit gang, I would have spared your life. But now I have no choice." Fang Yun gritted his teeth and looked at Shen Feiying. He said hatefully, "Don't pretend to be benevolent. Shen Feiying, I will not let you go even if I become a ghost." Shen Feiying shook his head. His palm exploded with earth energy and directly struck at Fang Yun. However, right at that moment, a gentle breeze blew past, completely negating the power of Shen Feiying's palm strike. Moreover, it even caused him to take a few steps back. However, he did not suffer any injuries. An old Taoist wearing a grayish-white Taoist robe with a sword on his back and a horsetail whisk in his right hand was already standing in front of Fang Yun and the others. He sighed and said, "Everyone, you have killed so many people and forced so many forces to surrender to the Jinwu Hall. You should be satisfied, right? It's time to stop." Seeing this old Taoist priest, Chen Hu's eyes immediately lit up, and he said in pleasant surprise, "It's Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Many thanks for saving me, Taoist Floating Cloud." The old Taoist was not famous in the outside world, but he was famous in the Northern Yen martial arts world. The biggest reason was that he was a martial arts grandmaster who was a rogue cultivator. The second reason was that he was a Taoist. Among the sects in the world, the power of the Northern Yen Taoism was actually not great. Of the three major Taoism sects, two were in Eastern Qi, and one was in Western Chu. As for the two major Buddhist sects, one was in southern China, and the other was in northern Yen. Although the bitter and cold land of the extreme north was not considered as the territory of northern Yen, it was next to northern Yen. There was no country there, so it was considered as the land of northern Yen. Therefore, in this way, the general understanding of the martial arts world was that the Eastern Qi Taoism sects were powerful, while the northern Yen Buddhism was flourishing. It was not easy for this Taoist priest Floating Cloud to become a Taoism grandmaster in northern Yen Taoism. Moreover, this Taoist priest Floating Cloud had a good reputation. He had almost no enemies, and his conduct was like his Taoist name. He was an idle floating cloud. He never incurred enmity, nor did he take the initiative to meddle in other people's business. He would only intervene when the matter was right in front of him. Fang Datong did not have much interaction with this Taoist priest Floating Cloud, an expert Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Therefore, Fang Datong had never thought of seeking this person's help. Who would have thought that this time, the other party would make an exception and take the initiative to help? Shen Feiying squinted his eyes and said with horror, "Taoist priest Floating Cloud, you have always been an idle cloud and a wild crane. It is not your style to intervene in this kind of matter." Taoist priest Floating Cloud smiled bitterly and shook his head. "So many people have come to my sect. I'm afraid I can't be an idle cloud and a wild crane. I said that you have killed enough people. The conduct of the Jinwu Hall is awe-inspiring and domineering enough. Shouldn't you stop? This way it will be convenient for you and me. Isn't this good? Taoist priest Floating Cloud was really not a person who liked to meddle in other people's business. In the past, when he was in the demon-killing alliance, Nie Renlong had even personally opened his mouth to invite him, but he had still refused. Therefore, he stood up now not simply to meddle in other people's business, but because he was annoyed by those people's words. Moreover, Chu Xiu's actions this time were a bit too big. Even Taoist priest Floating Cloud, who was like an idle cloud and a wild crane, felt threatened. If Chu Xiu really wanted to stir up the entire Northern Yin martial arts world, could he continue to be so unfettered? Therefore, no matter what, he had to make a trip here. Tanya stood up and said with a smile, Taoist priest Floating Cloud, right? You are a senior in Jianghu. Since you have stood up, we have to give you face. How about this? We were originally prepared to kill 2 people. Now killing 1 is enough. It will be up to the 2 of them to decide who lives and who dies. How about it? Is it enough to give you face? Hearing this, Taoist priest Floating Cloud immediately shook his head and said helplessly, Chunhu and Fong Yin have both gone through hardships. Don't use this kind of scheme to play with people's hearts. Everyone, you should all retreat. With me here, you won't be able to kill them. Go back and tell your official Chu to stop. If by any chance those monks from the Temple of Great Light are drawn out, then this matter will be completely blown up. At this moment, Yen Bugui, who was beside Tanya, actually rushed out with his heavy sword in hand and slashed down at Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Tanya's expression suddenly changed. He wanted to pull him back, but he couldn't. This caused him to involuntarily curse Yen Bugui in his heart for going crazy again. He had known Yen Bugui for such a long time, so he understood his strength better than anyone else. With Yen Bugui's current strength, it wouldn't be a problem for him to kill some ordinary Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artists. However, the problem was that his current opponent was a martial arts grandmaster. This guy also had to look at his opponent before going crazy. They had known each other for so many years. Although Yen Bugui's character was somewhat eccentric, he was still considered a good friend of Tanya's. Tanya naturally couldn't just watch Yen Bugui throw away his life like this. Therefore, the moment Yen Bugui made his move, a flying knife in Tanya's hand also slashed out. Although it was launched later, it arrived first. With a whistling knife aura, it instantly arrived in front of Taoist priest Floating Cloud. Seeing that Tanya and Yen Bugui had already made their move, Zhao Qingping also gritted his teeth and charged at Taoist priest Floating Cloud with his long spear. Behind him, Luo Sansong also slashed down with her knife. Although they didn't have a deep friendship with Tanya and Yen Bugui, they were currently working under Chu Xiu, so they naturally couldn't just watch Tanya and the others throw away their lives like this. Only Shen Feiying didn't move. Facing a martial arts grandmaster, these guys even dared to make a move. Had they lost their minds? Even if Shen Feiying wanted to put on a good performance, he still didn't have the courage to make a move against a martial arts grandmaster. Taoist priest Floating Cloud sighed and swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. A majestic astral energy swept out like a vast river, its momentum astonishing. Moreover, this majestic astral energy also contained a mellow aura. As it surged, it instantly wore down their attacks. Tanya's flying knife fell to the ground. Yen Bugui was sent flying along with his sword, and Zhao Qingping and Luo Sansong were also repelled. Fortunately, Taoist priest Floating Cloud didn't have any murderous intent. Otherwise, they would all have ended up with serious injuries. Swinging his horsetail whisk, Taoist priest Floating Cloud said in a deep voice, Everyone, I don't want to make a big deal out of this. I'll say it again. If you all retreat, this matter will be considered settled. At this time, a cold voice said, Taoist priest Floating Cloud, you've cultivated for so many years. Do you know what the secret to longevity is? Then mind your own business. You've been living like a wild crane and drifting clouds for so many years, and now you've broken through your cultivation. Is it worth it? Following the sound of that voice, Chu Xiu's figure stepped into the dilapidated temple. In an instant, a powerful demonic energy lingered in the entire dilapidated temple. The atmosphere was oppressive and stagnant, as if it could drip water. The complexions of Tanya and the others didn't change at all, because they knew that Chu Xiu would definitely be following behind them. On the other hand, Fang Yun and Chen, whose faces revealed extreme hatred. Chu Xiu. He was the main culprit that caused the entire giant spirit gang to change. Without Chu Xiu, just relying on Shen Feiying alone, even if he had second thoughts, he still wouldn't have been able to do anything to Fang Datong. As long as Shen Feiying hadn't reached the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, he could only bow his head in front of Fang Datong. Taoist priest Floating Cloud looked at Chu Xiu, his face also revealing a solemn expression, no longer as relaxed as before. When facing Tanya and the others, Taoist priest Floating Cloud could still put on the posture of a senior expert. But when facing Chu Xiu at this time, under that extremely strong pressure and dignified aura, Taoist priest Floating Cloud didn't dare to relax even a little bit. He hadn't dealt with Chu Xiu before, but coincidentally, among those people Chu Xiu had killed, he had dealt with many of them. For example, Nie Renlong, Fang Datong and Chunyang Dao Sex Shenyangzi. These people all died at the hands of Chu Xiu. One could imagine how terrifying this young man was, and how powerful his demonic might was. Taoist priest Floating Cloud sighed. Official Chu, Fang Datong participated in the demon-killing alliance in the past, and was killed by you. This is karma. But the people you killed along the way and the sects you forced to submit are not few. Is it not enough now? Chu Xiu stood with his hands behind his back and said indifferently, Taoist priest, do you want to stand up for them? Just now you had my subordinates withdraw. They weren't a match for you, so I'm here now. I'll also give you a choice. Hand over Chun Hu and Fang Yin and retreat, and I'll agree to stop. If not, then we'll fight. My martial subduing hall will continue to suppress the Northern Yin martial arts world. When the time comes, more people will die. Taoist priest Floating Cloud, whether 2 people die or a group of people die, I'll let you choose. Taoist priest Floating Cloud's complexion suddenly changed. He was a person who was unwilling to kill the innocent. He couldn't be considered a good person, but he was definitely a good person. In the end, how should he choose between the lives of 2 people and the lives of a group of people? Should he sacrifice Chun Hu and Fang Yin to save the others? Would that be fair to these 2 people? If he didn't choose this question well, it would affect his state of mind. Chapter 682. Chu Xiu looked at Taoist Floating Cloud indifferently. He wanted to see how this Taoist priest would choose. In fact, this kind of question was easy to choose for both true villains and hypocrites. For true villains, they would choose the side that would benefit them the most. If they only wanted to use Fang Yu's identity to stir up trouble, then they could completely disregard the lives and interests of the entire Northern Yen martial world. If this question was asked by a hypocrite, then the other party would certainly make an awkward expression and choose to sacrifice Fang Yu and Chen Hu to save the majority and obtain reputation. Unfortunately, Taoist Floating Cloud wasn't a true villain, nor was he a hypocrite. He was indeed a good person, so the feeling of having people's lives in his hands was not pleasant, and made him feel very conflicted. After a long while, Taoist Floating Cloud exhaled and said, The lives of 2 people are lives, and the lives of a group of people are also lives. This question of official Chu has stumped this poor Taoist, so this poor Taoist can only choose neither. Since this poor Taoist has already taken care of this matter, then I can only take care of it to the end. Chu Xiu smiled and said, Taoist Floating Cloud is really responsible. Very well then, I'll fulfill your wish, Taoist. As his voice fell, Chu Xiu's heavenly demon dance was already in his hand at some point. With a slash, his hatred and demonic aura instantly soared to the sky, and his demonic might covered the sky. Since stepping into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, this was actually the first time Chu Xiu had used his full strength. The last time Fang Yu had attacked, Chu Xiu hadn't even used half of his strength. Now Chu Xiu looked like he was going all out. Chu Xiu didn't know Taoist Floating Cloud's strength for the time being, but he had heard of this person. Although Taoist Floating Cloud was a rogue cultivator, his inheritance was orthodox and couldn't be underestimated. Moreover, he had also stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm for more than 10 years, so his accumulation was unusually deep. Behind Chu Xiu, Tanya and the others also looked at Chu Xiu with shock. They knew that after official Chu stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, his strength would definitely usher in a qualitative leap, but they did not expect Chu Xiu's power to be so strong. Daoist Floating Cloud brandished the long sword in his hand, and in an instant, his astral energy swept over like a flowing cloud. It met Chu Xiu's blade and made a sharp turn. Upon closer inspection, that astral energy didn't seem to have any attribute, but it contained the power of yin and yang. It constantly wore down the power of Chu Xiu's blade. With a loud bang, the devilry scattered in all directions. Daoist Floating Cloud took a step back, a grave expression on his face. Daoist Floating Cloud had cultivated martial Dao for more than 100 years, but the result was that he still wasn't as strong as a 20-year-old youngster's strength and foundation. This was no small blow to Daoist Floating Cloud. Chu Xiu was able to make a name for himself in Jianghu as a member of the Yinma clan, and he even survived the joint attack of the righteous Wulin. He was really not easy to get along with. Therefore, after exchanging a blow, the horsetail whisk in Daoist Floating Cloud's hand curled up, and a gentle astral energy swept towards Chun Hu and Fang Yun. He hadn't come to find Chu Xiu to decide victory or defeat, but to save someone. As long as the person didn't die, everything was fine. The corner of Chu Xiu's mouth revealed the trace of a sneer. To tell the truth, even if Daoist Floating Cloud hadn't appeared to meddle in other people's business this time, Chu Xiu would still have looked for a weighty target. His plan for the entire northern Yen world of martial arts was from the bottom to the top. Now that a small and weak sect like the Shenjia village had already surrendered to him, he had to look for a weighty target to establish his might. Daoist Floating Cloud just happened to bump into the muzzle of his spear. How could he let him leave like this? Therefore, Chun Hu wasn't important now, and neither was Fang Yun. Daoist Floating Cloud was the most important person. Chu Xiu withdrew his saber and formed a seal, displaying the colorless fixed palm mudra. Sumeru like a mustard seed. Heaven and earth reverse. Under the mudra, all power was melted away, and the formidable Buddhist light extinguished everything, causing Daoist Floating Cloud to gnash his teeth in hatred. Daoist Floating Cloud and Buddhism couldn't coexist. He hadn't been this angry when Chu Xiu had displayed his demonic arts, but now Chu Xiu had used a Buddhist cultivation technique to repel him. This made Daoist Floating Cloud very unhappy. Just as Daoist Floating Cloud was preparing to make a move, Chu Xiu's whole body blossomed with a golden primordial spirit, and the soul-extinguishing arrow was unleashed. Demonic energy fused into the soul-extinguishing arrow, and it swiftly shot towards Daoist Floating Cloud with a silent whistle. Moreover, this wasn't the end. Chu Xiu had unexpectedly shot 3 soul-extinguishing arrows in a row. The 3 primordial spirit arrows tightly locked onto Daoist Floating Cloud, immediately causing alarm bells to ring in his mind. Previously, Chu Xiu hadn't been able to extravagantly use a martial technique like the soul-extinguishing arrow that consumed a great deal of mental power. But now that he'd shot 3 arrows in a row, it didn't have much of an effect on Chu Xiu. Daoist Floating Cloud didn't excel in mental power. The horsetail whisk in his hand swept out, and in an instant, the 2 energies of yin and yang circulated for hundreds of meters. A clear and turbid power erupted with a rumble, wrapping his entire body within. The soul-extinguishing arrow shot into the power of yin and yang. It was obviously formless mental power, but it was strangled to death by the tangible power of yin and yang. The power of yin and yang was the most primitive power between heaven and earth, and the orthodox Taoism cultivated this power. Daoist Floating Cloud being able to cultivate to this stage as a rogue cultivator had a lot to do with his orthodox Taoism background. But at this time, Chu Xiu took a step forward, and the sun, moon, and stars rotated in his eyes. In an instant, Daoist Floating Cloud felt as if everything around him had come to a standstill. The power of the laws was unceasingly decomposed in Chu Xiu's eyes. The sun of heaven's gaze, the circulation of the 2 energies of yin and yang, had nowhere to hide in Chu Xiu's eyes. In an instant, Daoist Floating Cloud's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. Other people couldn't sense it, but Daoist Floating Cloud, a martial artist of orthodox Taoism background, could sense that what Chu Xiu was using was actually an orthodox Taoist technique. Chu Xiu was a dual cultivator of Buddhism and demonic Taoism. This was something many people knew. But he was unexpectedly also proficient in Taoism cultivation methods. This was something that very few people knew. Taoist floating cloud had urged the power of yin and yang to the extreme, and the Taiji River diagram seemed to be able to accommodate heaven and earth. It was unexpectedly somewhat similar to the Sumeru power of Chu Xiu's colorless fixed grand handprint. But at this time, Chu Xiu merely extended a finger, and in an instant, death chi erupted. Heavenly punishment, earthly extermination, immortal murdering divine finger. The power of this finger was originally very strong. Moreover, under the effect of Chu Xiu's heaven's sun gazing at air, the power of his finger just so happened to point at the point where the power of yin and yang combined. It was an exceptionally weak point. 1,000-kilometer dike would be destroyed by an ant's nest. The pitch-black death chi began to spread, and the power of yin and yang collapsed in a flash before finally shattering with a loud bang. Taoist floating cloud retreated several steps. The horsetail whisk in his hand had already been thoroughly torn apart. His complexion was pale, and his eyes revealed a look of astonishment. He'd already predicted that this young man, Chu Xiu, would be very strong, but now it seemed that the other's strength had simply surpassed his imagination. The heavenly demon dance was held in Chu Xiu's hand, and the demonic chi all over his body soared several dozen meters into the sky. With the support of the nine heavens fiend golden body and the great guardian deity divine strength, Chu Xiu's fleshly body cultivation had already reached a valiant realm. A casual slash of his saber carried a heaven-shaking might. The saber fell, and Taoist floating cloud retreated once more. The second saber fell, and Taoist floating cloud's complexion turned pale. The hand that held the sword was trembling. The third saber fell, and the long sword in Taoist floating cloud's hand directly shattered. He spat out a mouthful of blood, and his expression was dispirited. After a series of offensive attacks, Taoist floating cloud had already fallen into defeat. But as far as Chu Xiu was concerned, defeating Taoist floating cloud didn't seem to be a difficult matter at all. In fact, this was indeed the case. Chu Xiu had risked his life to condense the eternal demon core. In the end, he'd accumulated such a formidable foundation of power, and stepped into the martial Tao Grandmaster realm. If he was still inferior to Taoist floating cloud, then what was the point of wasting so much effort? Just as Chu Xiu was preparing to attack again, Fang Yun suddenly stepped forward from the side. He held a dagger in his hand and looked at Chu Xiu and Shen Feiying. He roared, "Enough people have died because of me, and I don't want to continue living. But the two of you will suffer retribution." As his voice fell, Fang Yun unexpectedly stabbed himself in the chest with the dagger, committing suicide on the spot. To tell the truth, neither Taoist floating cloud nor Chu Xiu had expected Fang Yun's choice. In Shen Feiying's words, Fang Yun was actually somewhat cowardly and naive. He didn't have any opinions of his own. Chen, who hadn't expected that this honest man would be forced into a corner, and actually choose to use such a violent method to confront Chu Xiu. He could also see that Taoist floating cloud couldn't save him. Since that was the case, why would he still implicate Taoist floating cloud? He might as well settle things on his own and save himself from being humiliated by Chu Xiu. Chen Hu sighed. He also clenched his teeth, shattered his own heart meridian, and followed Fang Yun. Taoist floating cloud stared blankly at this scene. He looked at Chu Xiu with an angry expression on his face and said, "Chu Xiu, your conduct is so extreme and ruthless, and you've committed the sin of killing so many innocent people. In the future, you will definitely suffer retribution." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Oh, retribution? More than one person has said this to me, but aren't I still alive and well right now? I, Chu Xiu, don't believe in fate." Taoist floating cloud didn't speak any more nonsense with Chu Xiu. He coldly snorted, and the yin and yang chi swept out from his body. His speed erupted to the limit as he directly turned around and left. He'd come to save people. Now that they were already dead, what else could he save? Chu Xiu also didn't chase after him. His goal of establishing his might had been achieved, so it didn't matter whether Taoist floating cloud left or not. Of course, the fundamental reason was that if Chu Xiu wanted to stop Taoist floating cloud, he would probably have to expend some strength. Although Dao's floating cloud had just been bombarded by Chu Xiu to the point of vomiting blood, he actually still had some strength left over. If he fought with his life on the line, he still had the opportunity to escape. Tanya walked behind Chu Xiu and asked, "My lord, what do we do now?" Chu Xiu glanced at the corpse on the ground and said, "Take the corpse away. Henceforth, the giant spirit gang will no longer have anyone from Fang Datong's bloodline. All the forces that have signed the agreement with the subduing martial hall must act according to the rules of the subduing martial hall. As for the other forces, don't provoke them for the time being. I reckon that it won't be long before someone will come knocking on your door." The other sects had encouraged Dao's floating cloud to meddle in other people's business. Now that Dao's floating cloud had retreated in defeat, he reckoned that they wouldn't sit still and await death. If someone else appeared, that person's weight would certainly be heavier than Dao's floating clouds. Chapter 683. Inside the floating cloud temple, more than a dozen small forces patriarchs and sect leaders were waiting anxiously. It was they who collectively came to the floating cloud temple and instigated Taoist priest floating cloud to make a move. Otherwise, with Taoist priest floating cloud's character, he would only make a move if Chu Xiu came knocking on his door. Someone said, "Everyone, do you think Taoist priest floating cloud can stop Chu Xiu? After all, even Ye Renlong died at his hands back in the days of the demon-killing alliance, and now that Chu Xiu is already an expert at the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, I feel that things don't bode well for Dao's floating cloud." Everyone present glanced at him and snorted disdainfully. Previously, they decided to instigate Taoist priest floating cloud to make a move. It was everyone's decision. Now you came to pretend to be a good person and worry about Taoist priest floating cloud's safety. What are you pretending for? In fact, everyone had some uncertainty in their hearts, but they didn't expect Taoist priest floating cloud to win against Chu Xiu. As long as Taoist priest floating cloud could make Chu Xiu stop temporarily, that would be enough. At this moment, the door of the Taoist temple was pushed open, and a pale Taoist priest floating cloud staggered in. Everyone could see that Taoist priest floating cloud's aura was weak. Everyone present quickly said, "Taoist priest, what happened to you? Did something go wrong?" Taoist priest floating cloud weakly waved his hand and said, "Everyone, Chu Xiu's demonic power is strong. I have lived for 100 years in vain, but I am still not his opponent. Fang Datong's only son, Fang Yun, and the giant spirit gang's elder, Chen Hu, have committed suicide. Everyone, I as an old Taoist priest, can't interfere in this matter. If I interfere, I am afraid that I will lose my life." Everyone present looked at each other. After hearing this, what else could they say? Force Taoist priest floating cloud to make a move? Everyone left helplessly. After leaving, everyone looked at each other a few times. Someone said, "Everyone, what should we do now? Do we really have to surrender to the martial suppression hall?" The small forces present were not very strong, but at the same time, they were also overlords in their local area, similar to the Shen family village. Normally, as long as they did not take the initiative to provoke them, those large sects would not attack them. Now, of course, they couldn't stand having a force riding on their heads and ordering them around, so they still wanted to struggle. Someone gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go to the Temple of Great Light. I don't believe that the monks of the Great Light Temple will let Chu Xiu continue to be arrogant in the northern Yen martial world." Actually, the forces present were not too willing to deal with the Great Guangming Temple. The reason was simple. Those monks were too prejudiced. The forces present were not considered orthodox sections. Although they had not done too many evil things, who would dare to say that they were completely innocent? Therefore, as long as they did anything that was not in line with the values of the disciples of the Great Light Temple, the other party would definitely come out to meddle in their business. Moreover, with the strength of those monks, even if they wanted to meddle in other people's business, the people present could do nothing but endure it. However, compared to the suppression martial hall, the group of monks from the Great Light Temple was considered very cute. Therefore, after some discussion, they headed straight for the Temple of Great Light. The Temple of Great Light was far away in the wild land of the far north, so it was not that convenient to go there once. Fortunately, The masters and sect leaders who went to the Temple of Great Light were not weak. Almost all of them had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm, or the 5 Chi's origin realm. Under the condition that they did not care about their vital chi and rushed at full speed, it took them half a month to reach the Temple of Great Light. In front of the mountain gate of the Temple of Great Light, everyone was received by a disciple who was in charge of welcoming guests. When everyone present explained everything and wanted to see the abbot, the disciple said helplessly, "Benefactors, the abbot is in seclusion. No one can disturb him." "Then we want to see Master Su Yun, the head of the Raging Thought Zen Hall." These people had also heard that in the Temple of Great Light, when the abbot was not around, the head of the Raging Thought Zen Hall, Su Yun, had the most power. The disciple shook his head and said, "I'm afraid you haven't paid attention to some news in the martial world recently, right? Master Su Yun is currently in West Chu. A few days ago he fought with the head of the 9 great god magi of moon-worshipping cult, Eastern Emperor Tai. He is not in the temple now." Everyone present immediately looked at each other. Someone asked unwillingly, "Then what about the Kongji Zen Hall's Master Su Du and the Karma Zen Hall's Master Su Jing?" The disciple said, "The rise of moon-worshipping cult is a big deal, so Master Su Jing has already gone to West Chu with Master Su Yun. At the same time, there are also the Vajra School's Master Su Yen, the Arhut School's Master Su Hong, and a few other martial uncles." At this point, the disciple said in a strange tone, "As for Master Su Du, he is in the temple, but because of some matters he was punished by Master Su Yin to be in confinement. Are you sure you want Master Su Du to help you?" Everyone present was stunned, but then they suddenly remembered that there seemed to be some rumors in the martial world that the Great Light Temple's Kongji Zen Hall's Master Su Du seems to be a little unreliable. Everyone present looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Originally, they thought that the Great Light Temple would definitely be able to subdue Chu Xiu. But now they realized that in the entire Great Light Temple, the truly reliable masters were either not around or in confinement, leaving only the unreliable ones. At this point, they finally understood why Chu Xiu was so arrogant in his actions. It turned out that he had already calculated that the Great Light Temple, which truly had the power to deal with him in the Northern Yen martial world, no longer had their eyes on him. Even though Chu Xiu had gone overboard in the Northern Yen land, in the eyes of the Great Light Temple, they were still no match for the moon-worshipping cult's threat. Chu Xiu was a demon, but he was at best a little demon now. If the moon-worshipping cult were to be left alone, they would probably develop into a second Kunlun devil cult. Just as the people from the forces were about to leave dejectedly, someone suddenly pushed open the door and said in a deep voice, "The Great Light Temple is not without people. If they're not around, I'm still around. Chu Xiu is wreaking havoc in the Northern Yen martial world. Other people don't care, but how can the Great Light Temple not care?" The person who pushed open the door and entered was the Dharma Institute's first seat, Su Xing. He also had quite a bit of a grudge against Chu Xiu. The disciple looked at Su Xing and said hesitantly, "Uncle Su Xing, but Uncle Su Yun previously instructed." Before the disciple could finish speaking, he was interrupted by Su Xing. "Senior brother Su Yun is now in West Chu, and things are constantly changing. How can we do everything according to senior brother Su Yun's instructions? All right, you don't have to worry about this. I'll take responsibility." Hearing Su Xing say this, the disciple could only retreat helplessly. Currently, the abbot was in confinement, and 2 of the 3 great meditation halls' first seats were in West Chu. Only Su Du was in the temple. However, it seemed like Su Du was even more unreliable. Within the Great Light Temple, there was really no one who could order Su Xing around. The people present looked at Su Xing expectantly. They did not know what had happened in the Great Light Temple in the past. They only knew that Su Xing was the Dharma Institute's first seat and a veteran martial arts master. Now that the Great Light Temple's first seat was standing up for them, how could they not suppress Chu Xiu? Looking at the people present, Su Xing said in a deep voice, "Tell me everything." The people present immediately nodded and told him about the giant spirit gang, as well as how Chu Xiu had used despicable means to force the Northern Yen martial world forces to join the suppression martial hall. Of course, from their mouths, the things that Chu Xiu had done were 10 times worse. They described him as an unforgivable devil. After listening to them, Su Xing said coldly, "Arrogant. Arrogant. He's simply lawless. Bring people to the giant spirit gang immediately." Within the Great Light Temple, although Su Xing could not order others around, he was still the Dharma Institute's first seat. After all, the disciples of the Dharma Institute would still listen to his orders. At the same time, within the giant spirit gang, Chu Xiu was going through the intelligence reports that Shen Feiying and the others had handed over. These intelligence reports were about the forces that had been forced to join the suppression martial hall. Previously, Chu Xiu had used some means to force these people to join the suppression martial hall. However, it was obvious that this group of people were not convinced. As long as they were given a chance, they would immediately rebel. As for the agreement that Chu Xiu had forced them to sign, it was no different from a piece of scrap paper. Therefore, Chu Xiu had to think of a safe way to make them submit, even if he had to force them to submit. At that moment, Shen Feiying ran in anxiously and said, "Sir, this is bad. The Great Light Temple's Dharma Institute's first seat, Su Xing, has brought a large number of Great Light Temple's disciples here." Shen Feiying was really panicking at that moment. If one was not a Northern Yan person, one would not know the weight of the Great Light Temple. In the Northern Yan land, the Great Light Temple was the #1 sect in name and in reality. They had accumulated power for a long time. At that moment, when Shen Feiying heard that the Great Light Temple had actually come to their door, even if he knew that Chu Xiu was there to support them, he still felt like the sky was falling. Especially when the other party was a first seat of an academy. It should be known that when Fang Datong was around, he had to be polite to the first seat of an academy from the Great Light Temple. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "It's just the Great Light Temple. Why are you panicking? Moreover, Su Xing is an old acquaintance of mine. In the past, I continuously rose on the Longhu leaderboard because of this Master Su Xing. This person is my lucky star." As he said this, Chu Xiu walked straight out the door. Behind him, Shen Feiying still had a look of panic on his face. The prestige he had accumulated over a long period of time against the Great Light Temple would not fade so easily. Outside the giant spirit gang, there were hundreds of disciples of the Dharma house behind Su Xing. The weakest of these people had reached the physical invulnerability realm, and there were more than 10 of them who had reached the unity of heaven and man realm. Moreover, these disciples were not the entire Dharma house's disciples. They were just a small part of it. This was the foundation of a large sect. The true foundation of a large sect did not lie in a martial arts master like Su Xing or a first seat like him, but in these ordinary disciples. As long as these disciples were still around, they could grow into countless Su Xing in the future. The legacy of the Great Light Temple would never end. At that moment, Su Xing looked at Chu Xiu, who walked out of the giant spirit gang. His eyes flashed with majestic anger. Su Yin said that his anger was too strong. If he could not get rid of it, it would affect his cultivation. But for Su Xing, as long as he killed Chu Xiu, his obsession would naturally disappear. Why would he need to suppress his anger? Killing Chu Xiu was cultivation. Chapter 684. As soon as Chu Xiu stepped out of the door, he saw Xu Xing, who looked like he was about to kill someone. "Master Xu Xing, it's been a while. How have you been?" Seeing Chu Xiu again, although Xu Xing wanted nothing more than to kill Chu Xiu, he did not act like a rabid dog that could not wait to take revenge. After all, Xu Xing was the head of the Great Light Temple's martial arts court. He was here on behalf of the Great Light Temple, so he still had some self-restraint. Xu Xing said coldly, "It was good, but with you wreaking havoc in the Northern Yan pugilistic world and stirring up trouble, it's not good anymore. Chu Xiu, you were able to survive the joint attack of Eastern Qi and the Northern Yan pugilistic world. That was your luck, your fate. But you didn't cherish your luck. How dare you cause trouble in the Northern Yan world? Do you really think that no one in the Northern Yan pugilistic world can stop you?" Chu Xiu looked at Xu Xing seriously and said, "I, Chu Xiu, have never relied on luck to get to where I am now. I don't believe in luck. As for now, I'm working for the Imperial Court. If you're unhappy, you can go to Yanjing City and talk to His Majesty the Emperor. As for you saying that no one in the Northern Yan pugilistic world can stop me, Master Xuxing, do you mean that the person who can stop me is you? Master Xuxing, have you forgotten that you were defeated by me when you were still at the oneness of heaven and man realm? Now that I'm a martial arts grandmaster, who gave you the courage to say this to me? Are you worshipping Buddha or Bodhisattva? As Chu Xiu shouted the last sentence, the demonic aura around him soared into the sky. The aura was so powerful that it pierced the sky. How did he look like a warrior who had just stepped into the martial arts grandmaster realm? The demonic aura had completely overshadowed the Buddhist light around Xuxing. At the same time, the disciples of the Dharma house behind Xuxing shouted and charged towards the warriors behind Chu Xiu. The 6 great martial institutions of the Great Light Temple nurtured the elites among the elites. Their quality definitely far surpassed those martial artists of the Giant Spirit Gang. If it weren't for Tangya and the other elites under Chu Xiu's command, the Giant Spirit Gang wouldn't have been able to hold on for even half an hour. At this time, several miles away from the battle, several martial artists wearing the evil Yin-Yang Impermanence Taoist robes were watching the battle. The one leading them was the Shadow Mountain sect master, Taoist Wu Wang. A disciple behind Taoist Wu Wang said in a low voice, "Master, although this Chu Xiu is arrogant, he does have some ability. In such a short time he has already taken control of the Giant Spirit Gang and forced so many warriors to join the subduing martial hall. In comparison, our actions are much slower. In front of His Majesty, we will be outdone. Do you want us to make a move now and give Chu Xiu a hard time?" Taoist Wu Wang sneered and said, "Young people are all arrogant. It's not a problem that Chu Xiu acts in an overbearing manner, but the problem is that he isn't Yi Xiaonan of the moon-worshipping cult. Yi Xiaonan has the qualifications to act without scruples, but Chu Xiu doesn't. Just watch, in such a short time, he has already provoked the Great Light Temple. If he is given a little more time, I'm afraid he will offend more than half of the Northern Yin martial arts circle. With him attracting the firepower on the surface, we don't have to face those righteous sects directly. That's right. How's the contact with the Divine Martial Sect's Yin Huainan? Think of a way to take down the Divine Martial Sect. The power of the Divine Martial Sect far exceeds that of the Giant Spirit Gang." The disciple said in a low voice, "Yin Huainan is a schemer. Even if we threaten and bribe him, he still won't budge." Taoist Wu Wang snorted coldly and said, "Trash. Look at the people under Chu Xiu. They can all stand on their own. He will only make a move at the critical moment. Look at the few of you. Master has to deal with everything. What's the point of raising you?" The few disciples of Taoist Wu Wang lowered their heads and looked ashamed. However, they were cursing in their hearts. Chu Xiu was willing to give Tangya and the others absolute power, and even let Mei Qinglian take a portion of the people to guard the subduing martial hall. Yet, Taoist Wu Wang had to bring them with him at all times. How could they stand on their own? At this time, between Chu Xiu and Xuxing, demonic energy and Buddhist light exploded at the same time. The power was shocking. Xuxing's expression was solemn, and his dharma was solemn. Countless Buddhist shadows flickered behind him. Each shadow seemed to be the same, but also different. Amidst the endless Buddha shadows, Buddhist chants rippled out. It was as if they had extended out of the pure land of Buddha. They extended and continuously eroded the boundless demonic aura around Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's eyebrows twitched. He finally understood why Xuxing had the guts to provoke him again. He did not know what sort of technique Xuxing had cultivated, but his cultivation base had increased by a great deal, far surpassing his previous state. In fact, it was all thanks to Chu Xiu that Xuxing could have such a cultivation base. Previously on Mount Ba, Xuxing had been seriously injured by Chu Xiu, but Su Yin had stopped him from taking revenge, and punished him with confinement so that he could get rid of his anger. But in the end, Xuxing's anger was too strong. He had been in confinement for a long time, but he could not get rid of it completely. Moreover, Xuxing was very persistent, which was why his anger was so strong. When he felt that he could not get rid of his anger, he chose to cultivate the Pure Land Buddhist Kingdom Sutra, a secret technique of the Temple of Light, to forcibly suppress his anger. The Temple of Light had many secret techniques, so many that 99% of the warriors could not cultivate them all in their lifetime. So for most of the warriors of the Temple of Light, They did not struggle to find a technique, but to find the most suitable one among the many, and then cultivate it. For example, Zongxian was like this. There were very few people who chose to cultivate the Pure Land Buddhist Kingdom Sutra in the Temple of Light. It was not because this technique was not strong enough, but because it was very difficult to cultivate, and even slightly dangerous. The Pure Land Buddhist Kingdom Sutra required one to contain the power of thousands of Buddhas, and open up one's own Pure Land of Buddhism. But when one contained the power of thousands of Buddhas, it was easy to lose oneself, causing one to go mad. The price was too high. But when Su Xing's anger was at its peak, he chose to forcefully cultivate the Pure Land Buddhist Kingdom Sutra. He wanted to use the power of the technique to get rid of his anger, which was like fighting poison with poison. But in the end, he did not expect that his anger would not get rid of much. Instead, he managed to cultivate this secret technique by chance, and his abilities improved greatly. At that moment, in the boundless Pure Land of Buddhism, the demonic qi around Chuxiu was dissipating. In the Buddhist kingdom, all negative energy would be suppressed and melted. The only thing that was not suppressed was the restless eternal demon core in Chuxiu's body. Lifting his head, Chuxiu looked at Su Xing and said, "The Pure Land of Buddhism can contain thousands of Buddhas. I wonder if it can contain this Vairocana?" Forming a Buddhist seal, in an instant, Chuxiu's body shone brightly. The scorching Buddhist light was like lava, covering Chuxiu's body and releasing an extremely overbearing aura. The shadow of Vairocana appeared behind Chuxiu, and with a palm strike, he changed the sun and stole the heavens. When the devil was suppressed, he would immediately become a Buddha. The devil Buddha only needed a thought. Just a moment ago, Chuxiu was filled with demonic flames, but now, he was a dignified Buddha. Under the great art of changing sun, the Buddhist country's Pure Land kept on exploding. The Vairocana Dharma idol behind Chuxiu sent out another palm strike. Everything started to distort and melt. Even the Buddhist country's Pure Land showed signs of breaking apart. The power of the sun-changing technique combined with the formless palm mudra was shocking. After all, this was the strongest technique that Master Tam Yuan had accumulated in his lifetime of cultivation. Looking at Chuxiu, Su Xing said angrily, "Master Tam Yuan must have been blind to have given his inheritance to you. This is a disgrace to the Buddhist sect." Now, it was not just the people of the Great Light Temple. Almost everyone in the Buddhist sect could not understand why Master Tam Yuan would choose to give his cultivation to Chuxiu, the devil. After all, Master Tam Yuan was a holy monk recognized by the Buddhist sect. Naturally, they could not say that Master Tam Yuan had done such a thing before he died. They could only say that Chuxiu's acting skills were too good, and he had tricked Master Tam Yuan. But now, in a fit of rage, Su Xing had spoken the truth. He stepped forward, and with every step he took, Chuxiu formed a mudra with both hands. Chuxiu formed the fast and slow 9 words formula one after another. Finally, the 9 mudra merged into one, and an earth-shattering power erupted. The mudra of the Tantric sect was the fiercest and most violent. When the 9 mudra merged into one, the 9 mudra fell one after another like a wheel. Finally, with a loud bang, the Pure Land of Buddhism shattered. Su Xing suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes flashed with disbelief and indignation. The third time, this was the third time he had been injured by Chuxiu. The first 2 times were fine, but this time, it was because his strength had improved greatly that he took the initiative to cause trouble for Chuxiu. In the end, he was still the one who was injured. Su Xing had overlooked one thing. It was true that his strength had improved greatly, but Chuxiu had stepped into the martial path Grandmaster realm. This could no longer be described as a huge improvement in strength. It was like the world had been turned upside down. Chuxiu held the angry blade in his hand. Boundless demonic qi gathered in the angry blade. And within the monstrous demonic qi, an evil red glow bloomed. Su Xing had a deep impression of this move. In reality, no matter how many secret techniques he had cultivated to calm his mind, he would not be able to resist the power of the angry blade as long as he did not completely suppress his angry intent. Chuxiu was now almost able to control the angry blade. It was no longer like before, when he could only use one move and would be exhausted by the power after that. The blade slashed down, and before it landed, It had already triggered the angry intent in Su Xing's heart, causing his eyes to turn slightly red. With a furious roar, Su Xing formed a Buddhist mudra with his hand, ready to use the power of his qi and blood to resist the attack. However, at this moment, a wine gourd suddenly fell from midair, releasing a deep golden glow. It was clearly just a small wine gourd, but it seemed to carry a tremendous force, suppressing Chu Xiu's attack. Chapter 685. The palm-sized wine gourd had blocked Chu Xiu's 7-demon saber. The tremendous force was simply incomparably shocking. With a cold snort, the demonic aura on the angry blade suddenly erupted, and there was even a bloody aura mixed within it. Previously, the power of the 7 demon blades was mainly used to provoke the anger in the opponent's heart, so the pure power was not too great. Now that Chu Xiu had unleashed his ultimate power, the wine gourd exploded with a boom. At that moment, a figure appeared in front of Xu Xing, shaking his head. Tisk tsk. My wine gourd was made from the green vine spirit gourd. It was damaged to save you. Junior brother Xu Xing, don't forget to compensate me with a new gourd. Oh right, and the osmanthus wine inside. Su Xing stared at Su Du blankly. Senior brother Su Du, why are you here? Actually, in the Temple of Great Light, Su Du was much younger than Su Xing. However, Su Du's seniority was higher, and he was the first seat of the 3 great Zen halls, so Su Xing had to call him senior brother. In the past, in the Great Light Temple, Su Du was the most frivolous. Usually, he had a sloppy look and did not have any dignity to speak of, so Su Xing had never taken him seriously. Who would have thought that at this critical moment, Su Du would save him? Xu Du snorted and said, "Can I not come? If I hadn't come, I'm afraid you would have died under Chu Xiu's devil knife today." Before senior brother Su Yun left, he said that no one should leave the Great Light Temple. As long as there was no threat to the safety of the Great Light Temple, no one was allowed to intervene. Now, not only did you come out early, but you even disobeyed senior brother Su Yun's orders. Previously, it was the 2 of you who were snitching on me. Now, it's my turn to snitch on you with senior brother Void Cloud. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and looked at Su Du. He actually did not know much about these warriors from the Great Light Temple. He had only heard of most of them. Other than the abbot, the strongest person in the Temple of Great Light was undoubtedly the 3 great meditation hall's first seats. Among them, Su Yun was the strongest, and it was rumored that he was not inferior to abbot. On the other hand, the Karma Zen hall's first seat, Su Jing, studied the Tao of Karma and his cultivation was unfathomable. Those who fought with him would usually not even know how they died. As for Su Du, his strength was a mystery because he rarely fought head-on, and it was said that he was somewhat unreliable. However, when Wei Shuya and Chu Wuji helped to stop the Great Light Temple previously, Chu Wuji had fought with Su Du after all. Wei Shuya had lost to Su Yin in that battle, so Chu Xiu was too embarrassed to ask too much about the details. However, Chu Wuji only had one comment about Su Du. He's not weaker than me. This seemed to be a very arrogant comment, but it could also prove Su Du's strength. This was because Chu Wuji was an existence that was only a step away from entering the true fire spirit refinement realm. Since Su Du was not inferior to him, his strength could be imagined. The Great Light Temple really thinks highly of me. A martial arts institution's first seat and a Zen hall's first seat actually attacked together. Su Du chuckled and said, "If the Great Light Temple really thought highly of you, then it wouldn't be Su Xing who came with me. It would be senior brother Su Yun who came personally. At that time, you probably wouldn't be able to laugh anymore. Chu Xiu, how about we make a deal? If you and I stop together, the Great Light Temple won't find trouble with you for now, and you shouldn't go overboard. Although your seniority is low, with your current strength, if you bully some small sects, you will be bullying the weak." Su Xing looked at Su Du and frowned. "Senior brother Su Du, you don't want to kill Chu Xiu, but you want to compromise with him?" Su Du glanced at him and snorted. "Kill what? Do you want to kill him, or do I have to do it? If you can kill me, do you still need to talk about conditions here?" Senior brother Su Yun and the others have all gone to West Chu. Not only did they not get rid of the moon-worshipping cult, but they also messed up the Northern Yan. When that happens, you can forget about being a first seat. You might as well be a cook in the kitchen. Su Du had only exchanged one blow with Chu Xiu. With his strength, he naturally would not be afraid of Chu Xiu. However, the problem was that with the strength that Chu Xiu had displayed, as long as Chu Xiu wanted to escape, he would not be able to kill Chu Xiu. Although Su Du was usually joking and seemed a little unreliable, he was actually the person in the Great Light Temple who had the most sense of propriety. In the Great Light Temple, he had violated the rules many times and done many unreliable things. However, each time he had been testing the limits of the abbot and Su Yun, but he had never truly angered the two of them. At most, he had been punished with confinement. From this, it could be seen that Su Du was actually a person who knew his limits. Looking at Su Du, Chu Xiu nodded after a while and said, "I've given face to the Great Light Temple. In the future, I won't casually make a move. However, at the same time, it's best that no one comes looking for trouble with me. There are some people who know better than me how Taoist Fuyin appeared." Su Du spread his hands and said, "That's natural. The Great Light Temple saves people from suffering, but we can't save an idiot who only wants to die." After saying that, Su Du waved his hand and left with the disciples of the Dharma court, and Su Xing Shen Feiying, and the other disciples of the giant spirit gang looked at this scene in disbelief. This was even more shocking than when Chu Xiu had easily killed Fang Datong. That was the Great Light Temple, but they still could not gain any advantage from Chu Xiu. Looking at Chu Xiu's murderous look, if Su Du had not made a move in the end, he would have killed Su Xing. Tanya moved behind Chu Xiu and said, "Sir, why did you promise that monk not to make a move? Is the monk's strength really so terrifying?" With Tanya's realm, he couldn't see how strong Su Du was. He just threw a wine gourd. Was this person a hidden master? Chu Xiu didn't explain much. He just said faintly, "This person's strength is not below mine. It's not worthwhile to fight with him." Tanya nodded in understanding. If that was the case, he understood. Gather all the forces that have joined the Jinwu Hall, and prepare for a meeting. After instructing Tanya, Chu Xiu left directly. In fact, Chu Xiu was not fully familiar with the power of the real pellet state. Only when he fought with people of the same realm could Chu Xiu fully control his own power. It was just that the strength of his previous enemies was a little too weak. Daoist floating cloud could be considered as half of one, while Su Xing could more or less be considered as one. It was only when he fought with Su Xing that Chu Xiu used almost his full strength. He also needed to perfect his own strength. After this battle, there was a lot of shock in the Northern Yan underworld. Many Northern Yan underworld forces, especially those small forces, sighed. In the future, the Northern Yan underworld would probably never be peaceful. This Chu Xiu was arrogant and overbearing. In a short time, he had already controlled the giant spirit gang and forced so many forces to surrender. Daoist Fu Yun, who was quite famous in the martial arts world of Northern Yan, had been defeated by his hands and suffered serious injuries. Even if it was the Great Light Temple, a head of the martial arts court and a head of the Zen Hall, they couldn't do anything to him at the same time. Who else in the martial arts world of Northern Yan could subdue Chu Xiu? Yanjing City, in the council hall of the Jinwu Hall. Since the establishment of the Jinwu Hall, Chu Xiu had rarely stayed here. Now that Su Du had appeared, Chu Xiu also knew that he was probably close to the Great Light Temple's bottom line. Therefore, he also prepared to restrain himself and not make a move for the time being. Therefore, he returned to the Jinwu Hall to retreat and called everyone in for a meeting. At this time, there were more than 10 people sitting in the council hall of the Jinwu Hall. Except for Shen Feiying, the rest were the heads of the small forces who had been forced to join the Jinwu Hall by Chu Xiu. Apart from Shen Feiying, who had chosen the path of no return, the rest of the people present were all whispering to each other apprehensively. They did not know why Chu Xiu had called them over. However, at this time these people had almost given up the mentality of continuing to struggle. Even the Great Light Temple could not control Chu Xiu now. What else could they use to resist? At this time, Chu Xiu stepped through the door, and the originally noisy council hall instantly quieted down. Shen Feiying immediately stood up and saluted respectfully. "Greetings, Official Chu." When the rest saw this scene, they could only stand up and salute as well. "Greetings, Official Chu." Sitting on the main seat, Chu Xiu casually waved his hand and said, No need to be so polite. I know that most of you, except for sect leader Shin, say that you are greeting me, but in fact you want me to die now. Am I right? Shin Feiying had to follow Chu Xiu to the end. If Chu Xiu died, he would not have a good ending. Therefore, even if it was for himself, he was loyal to Chu Xiu. However, it was not necessarily the case for others. Everyone present did not speak. It was obvious that they had tacitly agreed to this point. Chu Xiu said faintly, "Actually, I am very particular about the rules. A melon that is forcefully twisted is not necessarily not sweet, but since I have eaten the melon, I have to give some benefits no matter what." As he spoke, Chu Xiu directly threw a few books to Shin Feiying. Shin Feiying took the things in his hands in doubt, and flipped through the contents. His face suddenly showed ecstasy, and his hands were trembling slightly. Everyone present was a little curious. What did Chu Xiu give to Shin Feiying to make him so excited? Chu Xiu pointed at Shin Feiying and said, "Sect leader Shen is diligent in doing things, so naturally, there should be a reward." The things in his hands are not cultivation methods, but some notes. They are the notes left by the previous hallmasters of the Guanzhong torture room about condensing the true martial elixir. Among them, there are also notes left by Chu Kuanga and Guan Xiyu. Hearing this, everyone's breathing suddenly quickened. There were many people present who were at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm. What did the martial artists at the Unity of Heaven and Man realm, who came from small sects, lack the most? In addition to cultivation methods, it was the foundation. These notes on condensing the true martial elixir were one of the foundations. Only forces that had produced several martial Dao masters were qualified to have such things. Just like Shin Feiying, he had stepped into the Unity of Heaven and Man realm for so long. And this was what he lacked the most. Feng Datong had long stepped into the martial Dao master realm, but he did not give these things to Shin Feiying. Therefore, Feng Datong was actually a little wary of Shin Feiying, and this was also one of the reasons why Shin Feiying hated Feng Datong. Chapter 686. Chu Xiu had tossed out the notes left behind by several martial Dao grandmasters of the Guanzhong Disciplinary Hall, right off the bat. This was indeed very attractive. Until this moment, they seemed to know the difference between the righteous and the demonic. Most of the so-called righteous martial arts world was all talk and no action. They always used some high-sounding reasons to fool you. Nie Renlong was good at this in the past. Before the demon-slaying alliance, Nie Renlong's words were high-sounding and righteous, but in reality, there were not many benefits. Since they were all righteous martial arts world, it was natural to put righteousness and morality first. What kind of words would it be to talk about benefits and benefits? On the other hand, the demonic path represented by Chu Xiu was much simpler. You do things for me, and I will give you benefits. It was that simple. This made them feel very good. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Gang leader Shin has helped me with my matters, so I naturally won't treat him unfairly. However, you guys won't have such treatment for the time being." A master of a small family could not help but say, "Dare I ask official Chu, what do we have to do to get this treatment?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "It's very simple. Just help the Zhenwu Hall. I have an agreement with the monks of the Great Light Temple. I will not make a move during this time, but you are different. You can do whatever you want. During this time, if anyone can make a forced surrender to the Zhenwu Hall, no matter what means you use, you can come to me to receive a reward. Whether it is a secret book of martial arts, or the notes of condensing pills, or even if you want me to personally guide you in martial arts, it is all possible." Upon hearing this, everyone's breathing suddenly became rapid. What Chu Xiu said could be said to be exactly what they wanted. It was all what they needed. What these small forces and families lacked was heritage and heritage. Now that Chu Xiu could give them all of these, it seemed that joining the Suppression Martial Hall was not a difficult thing to do. Waving his hand, Chu Xiu dismissed them for the time being. Mei Qinglian walked in and said in surprise, "You're quite generous. The Guanzhong torture room has kept so many secret manuals for so many years, and you're giving them away just like that?" Chu Xiu said indifferently, "To them these things are secret manuals, but to you and me, they're nothing more than ordinary things. There's no need to pay so much attention to them. I want to settle the matter with the Northern Yen as soon as possible, so that I can give Xianglong an explanation. I'm going to Wei County. Mei Qinglian was surprised. Why are we going to Wei County? Wei Commandery used to be a small country. Even now, although it was bigger than some of the Northern Yen commanderies, it was not very strong. Especially after the death of Lu Gongyuan and Shen Bai, the Azure Watersword sect was removed from the martial world song formula. Right now, there were plenty of sects that were thinking of replacing the Azure Watersword sect, but Wind Sweeping Building had yet to make a decision. To become a sect listed in the martial world song formula, it wasn't just about strength, but more importantly, the foundation. Therefore, Wind Sweeping Building had to be cautious. Otherwise, if they casually listed a sect in the martial world song formula and ended up getting wiped out within a few years, it would be a slap to Wind Sweeping Building's face. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "The martial world has a good understanding of the Azure Watersword sect's strength, but have you seen the sword art that Shen Bai used? Of course, you can interpret it as Shen Bai's own opportunity, and it has nothing to do with the Azure Watersword sect. But from what I know, ever since I crippled Shen Bai, he has been in seclusion in the Azure Watersword sect, and has never left. Therefore, I deduced that the Azure Watersword sect must be hiding some secrets that outsiders don't know about. Furthermore, when the Heaven Gate's Divine Lord Luo asked me for Shen Bai, he wasn't interested in Shen Bai's strength and talent, but something on Shen Bai. Apart from his amazing sword art, I really can't think of anything else on Shen Bai that could attract the attention of Divine Lord Luo. Therefore, after the Northern Yen is stabilized, I am also going to Wei Prefecture to take a look. Anyway, Wei Prefecture is also a part of the Northern Yen. As the Martial Suppression Hall's governor, it is reasonable for me to bring people to Wei Prefecture, isn't it?" Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. She didn't expect Chu Xiu to think so much. In fact, there were too many things that happened in that battle, causing most people to overlook many things. All the attention was placed on Chu Xiu, then on Divine Lord Luo. Later on, when the news of Shen Bai's moon-worshipping cult spread out, it shook the entire martial world. Who would pay attention to a dead person like Shen Bai? After assigning everyone's tasks, Chu Xiu immediately went into seclusion. After the forces that were forced to join by the Martial Suppression Hall saw the benefits, they were more ruthless than anyone else. They began to attack some of their former opponents or clans that were not in harmony with each other. Anyway, they had conflicts with these clans before. It was just that they usually only had friction with each other, and the conflict was controlled within a certain range. But now they had escalated the conflict, and the things that Chu Xiu took out just happened to give them a reason to start a war. In fact, Chu Xiu's method was very simple. It was nothing more than coercion and temptation. In the face of a force with backbone, they didn't care about your coercion, and they didn't care about your means of temptation. Naturally, it was useless. However, in this martial world, there were still many people who were greedy for life and were blinded by greed. Therefore, Chu Xiu's method became extremely useful. 1 month later, in the Shen family village, the new master of the Shen family village, Shen Changming, was proudly looking at some secret books of martial arts that he had exchanged from Chu Xiu. Although the previous master of the Shen family, Shen Changping, died in the hands of Chu Xiu, Shen Changming had no hatred for Chu Xiu. If the previous master did not die, how could he have the chance to become the master? Moreover, when Shen Changping was the master, he was always somewhat pedantic. Although the reputation of the Shen family village was good, in fact, the entire Shen family village did not get many benefits. Now that the Shen Jia village had joined the Suppression Martial Hall, they had no scruples in doing things. They directly made a move to forcefully subdue another small clan, and forced them to join the Suppression Martial Hall. He also successfully obtained Chu Xiu's reward. Of course, this was not only due to his efforts, but also because he borrowed the reputation of the Martial Suppression Hall. At this moment, a disciple ran in with a little panic. Shen Changming frowned and said, "What are you panicking about? Didn't I ask you to persuade the Li family to join the Martial Suppression Hall? Why? The other party refused?" The Li family and the Shen family were in-laws. The distance between the two sides was a little far, so there was no conflict of interest. Their relationship had always been good. Shen Changming was calculating at this time. If he could persuade the Li family to join the martial suppression hall, wouldn't he be able to get a reward without shedding a drop of blood? So during this time he sent several of his confidants to the Li family to lobby. The disciple said with an aggrieved expression, "Originally, we were about to succeed. With your personal letter, the Li family was about to agree. I didn't expect it to be disrupted in the end." Shen Changming frowned and said, "Who has eaten a bear's heart and leopard's gall to dare to disturb my Shen family's matters?" The disciple said, "The other party was wearing a Taoist robe and said that he was from the martial suppression hall." Shen Changming was stunned when he heard it. Someone from the martial suppression hall? What is going on? Could it be a misunderstanding? Put this matter aside for the time being and talk about it later. After giving the instructions, Shen Changming immediately went to Yanjing City and reported the matter to Chu Xiu. At this time, in the martial suppression hall headquarters in Yanjing City, Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and Tang Yu were all there. After Shen Changming finished speaking, he looked at Chu Xiu with some apprehension. After a long while, Chu Xiu waved his hand and said faintly, "Okay, you don't have to worry about this matter for the time being. However, you did a good job. Go and find Zhao Qingping for another reward." After waiting for Shen Changming to leave ecstatically, Mei Qinglian snorted and said, "Wearing a Taoist robe? Then it should be the guys from the Shade Mountain sect. They crossed the line." Chu Xiu said faintly, "It can't be considered as crossing the line. Taoist Wuyang is internal and I am external. If they want to completely absorb the Li family into the martial suppression hall, and make them completely part of the martial suppression hall, then it can't be considered as breaking the rules. It would be unreasonable for us to forcefully make a move." Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. "You mean this matter is over?" Mei Qinglian was very clear about Chu Xiu's character. He was not someone who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. But now Chu Xiu actually said that Taoist Wuyang and the others did not cross the line. This was very strange. Chu Xiu sneered. "Who said that I intend to let it go? Taoist Wuyang knows that his behavior is to test our bottom line. Regardless of whether this matter was done by him or his disciple, he can't escape responsibility. You do the first and I will do the second. It just so happens that I am still short of a stroke in my merit book. I will use the target that Taoist Wuyang has chosen to add to it." "You know the movements of Taoist Wuyang and the others?" Chu Xiu took out a letter and handed it to Mei Qinglian saying, "I don't know, but someone does. This is the information that Xiang Wu gave me. Taoist Wuyang really dared to make a move. He actually wants to pull the Divine Martial Sect into the Martial Suppression Hall. More accurately, it should be on his side." I handed the trade route of the giant spirit gang to Xiang Wu. Xiang Wu is returning the favor. He is from the northern Yan. No matter how secretive Taoist Wuyang and the others are, they can't escape his eyes. Mei Qinglian glanced at the contents of the information and frowned, saying, "Yan Huainan will join the Martial Suppression Hall? Unless you deal with Fang Datong and directly kill him and take control of the Divine Martial Sect, Yan Huainan will never do such a thing. How can an expert who is rather famous in the martial world and is ranked on the Wind Cloud list be willing to lead the entire Divine Martial Sect to become the Imperial Court's dog?" Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "Everyone has something that they want but can't obtain. Perhaps Taoist Wuyang has found such a thing? The Divine Martial Sect's 1,000-year celebration will be held in half a month. At that time, let's go and join in the fun. If you can't do things that harm others to benefit yourself, can't you do things that harm others without benefiting yourself?" Chapter 687. The Southern Yan's Divine Martial School was considered a large sect in the northern Yan land. However, if one looked closely at its history, it was actually not very powerful. The history of the Divine Martial Sect was indeed not short, with a history of 1,000 years. However, in reality, the previous few sect masters were very mediocre. Even though the Divine Martial Sect had such a domineering name, in reality, the Divine Martial Sect was just a small sect that did not make the cut. After several generations of accumulation, the Divine Martial School had produced an extremely talented person like Yan Huainan. Only then could he lead the divine martial school to rise and become one of the top forces in the Jianghu. At the moment, Yan Huainan was smiling as he welcomed the guests who had come to participate in the divine martial school's celebration. The divine martial school's reputation in the northern Yanland was not good, and Yan Huainan was not as good at managing his reputation as Nie Renlong was, but the divine martial school had not done anything evil. Yan Huainan was also very disciplined and rarely offended people. Therefore, many forces had come to congratulate the divine martial school during its millennium celebration. After standing in front of the door for a while, Yan Huainan handed the task of welcoming the guests to his eldest disciple and returned to the house. However, there was another person in the house at the moment. He was wearing an evil yin-yang impermanence Taoist robe and had a sinister appearance. It was Taoist Wuyang. Seeing Taoist Wuyang there, Yan Huainan could not help but frown. "Why are you still here? Didn't I say that I need to think about it?" Taoist Wuyang had an evil smile on his face as he said, "What is there to think about, Sect Master Yan? This is the only chance for you, or your divine martial school, to rise. I'm afraid that even you did not expect that your divine martial school would have a true fire spiritual refinement realm expert. Sect Master Yan, you've been a martial arts master for a long time, so you should have noticed that your divine martial school's cultivation method has flaws, causing your bottleneck to be greater than others. You must fix the cultivation method before you can take another step forward. In fact, this is the reason. In the past, your ancestral master took away a portion of the divine martial gate's cultivation method. To be able to cultivate to the martial Dao Grandmaster realm with an incomplete cultivation method and have such strength, to be honest, I quite admire you, Gate Master Yan." Yan Huainan frowned and said, "Are you sure you didn't lie to me about this? That's an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm. It's impossible that our divine martial sect doesn't have any records of it." Taoist Wuyang chuckled and said, "How could I possibly deceive Sect Master Yan on such a matter? When the ancestor of your divine martial sect stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm, he was outside, so the disciples of your sect did not know about it. Furthermore, your ancestor died accidentally in the southern barbarians. According to the investigation of the Yin Mountain sect, your ancestor might have died in the hands of the Sabodhi Monastery. That is the Sabodhi Monastery, one of the two Buddhist sects in the north and the south. Sect Master Yan, you don't have to think about revenge. However, I will hand over the inheritance of my ancestor to you, Sect Master Yan. In the future, the divine martial sect will become the vassal of the Zhenwu Hall, and at the same time, it will naturally become a part of the imperial court." Yan Huainan snorted coldly and said, "Being a dog of the imperial court can be considered as glorious?" Taoist Wuyang said in a low voice, "Sect Master Yan, this is the general trend. Regardless of whether you are a dog of the imperial court or not, I believe you should have sensed that the martial world has not been peaceful recently. Yi Shaonan defeated the old heavenly master and divine monk Rama in a row, and the moon-worshipping cult already has the atmosphere and power of the #1 sect of the evil path. The hidden devil lineage has also begun to reappear in the martial world. The righteous martial world is in chaos, and everyone is scheming. At this time, no one can remain absolutely neutral, and no one can guarantee absolute safety. Sect Master Yan, which side is your divine martial sect going to stand on in this storm? The righteous path or the evil path? If you don't want to stand on either side, then your only choice is the imperial court. Although the imperial court cannot suppress the war between the righteous path and the demonic path, it can at least protect your divine martial sect." Yan Huainan's expression was somewhat uncertain. In fact, Yan Huainan would definitely refuse to join the so-called Zhenwu Hall. As the sect master of the divine martial sect, he did not want to have anything to do with the imperial court. However, when Taoist Wuyang took out the relic of their divine martial sect's ancestor, he wavered. Even he did not know that his divine martial sect, which did not seem to have produced any powerhouses, actually had an ancestor in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Furthermore, just as Taoist Wuyang said, a storm was brewing in the martial world, and the divine martial sect had to think of a way to protect itself. Yan Huainan was silent for a while, then said, "I still want to ask one more thing. Who is in charge of your Zhenwu Hall?" During this time, Chu Xiu's reputation in the northern Yan martial world was not weak. He controlled the giant spirit gang, severely injured Taoist floating cloud, and even made the Great Light Temple return empty-handed. He subdued countless northern Yan martial world forces, and his limelight was unparalleled. You should know about the grudge between me and Chu Xiu. If I become Chu Xiu's subordinate after joining the Jinwu Hall, wouldn't I become a joke? Taoist Wuyang said indifferently. His Majesty personally said that in the Jinwu Hall, Chu Xiu is the governor to the outside world, and I am the chief manager to the inside world. There is no difference in seniority. Right now, Chu Xiu is famous in the martial world, but after Sect Master Yan joins the Jinwu Hall, it will be my turn to be more famous than Chu Xiu. You are on my side, and you have no direct relationship with Chu Xiu. He cannot control you. The martial artists in West Yan basically knew about the grudge between Yan Huainan and Chu Xiu, and the reason was because of his precious daughter. To be honest, regarding this matter, not only did the martial artists in West Yan not hate Chu Xiu, but they were also grateful to Chu Xiu. Yan Tingting used to be a tyrant in West Yan. She was simply unreasonable, but no one could do anything to her. After all, she was Yan Huainan's most beloved daughter. In the end, Yan Tingting was completely scared out of her wits by Chu Xiu. She stayed in the Divine Martial Gate all day long, which saved West Yan from harm. Taoist Wuyang also knew about Yan Tingting, and he also looked down on Yan Huainan. It was not shameful for a man to pursue fame, wealth, and power. However, Yan Huainan was the sect master of a sect, yet he spoiled his daughter unreasonably. This was not a good thing, as he was too sentimental about his daughter. Meanwhile, on the mountain road in the outside world, Chu Xiu was leading Mei Qinglian and the others. They were slowly ascending the mountain road to the Divine Martial Gate. When the martial artists saw Chu Xiu, they were all surprised. Why was Chu Xiu here? Had the Divine Martial Gate surrendered to the Jinwu Hall? Or was he looking for trouble? The senior disciple of the Divine Martial Gate, who was in charge of welcoming the guests, braced himself and walked up. Chu Xiu, what do you want to do in my Divine Martial Gate? Chu Xiu laughed and said, Of course, I am here to celebrate the Millennium Celebration of your Divine Martial Gate. Although you did not invite me, as the governor of the Jinwu Hall, I have to come on behalf of the Imperial Court to congratulate you. By the way, I have also brought a gift to congratulate the prosperity of the Divine Martial Gate, which has lasted for thousands of years. Everyone present was stunned, but then they felt that there was something wrong with Chu Xiu's words. What did he mean by lasting for thousands of years? Now that the history of the Divine Martial Gate had reached 1,000 years, Chu Xiu's words were like wishing a centenarian a long life. It was very awkward. However, everyone present, including the senior disciple of the Divine Martial Gate, did not dare to pick on Chu Xiu. However, when Chu Xiu asked someone to carry the gift up, everyone's complexion changed. They were sure that Chu Xiu was definitely looking for trouble. The gift that Chu Xiu asked someone to carry up was actually a huge mechanical pendulum. The appearance was very gorgeous, but the problem was, would anyone give a clock as a gift? Sending a clock to the end of its life was simply deliberately humiliating the Divine Martial Gate. Patting the big clock, Chu Xiu laughed and said, This is a treasure produced in the western region. It is rare in the Central Plains. I spent a lot of effort to get it. How about it? Are you touched? At this moment an angry shout came. Chu Xiu, what do you mean by this? Yan Huainan strode over with a hint of anger on his face. The Divine Martial Gate's Millennium Celebration was supposed to be a joyous occasion, but now it had been disrupted by Chu Xiu. Just now he had been talking about Chu Xiu with Taoist Wuyang. He did not expect that Chu Xiu would appear in front of him now. Chu Xiu said indifferently, I said it was a congratulatory gift. Even if Sect Master Yan does not like my gift, at least I showed my sincerity, right? Yan Huainan took a deep breath and said, Okay, now that the gift is here, you can leave. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, This is your fault, Sect Master Yan. How can you do things like this? You want me to leave after giving me the gift? You won't even let me eat? Yan Huainan suppressed his anger and said, Okay, prepare for the banquet. Today was the Divine Martial Gate's Millennium Celebration. Although Chu Xiu looked like he was looking for trouble, he had not done anything against the rules. Yan Huainan could not turn against him directly. As a result, Yan Huainan had to suppress his anger and put up with it for a while. A group of disciples of the Divine Martial Gate began to set up a banquet in the square in the center of the Divine Martial Gate, inviting the people from the martial arts world to sit down. To prevent Chu Xiu from deliberately making trouble, Yan Huainan had placed him at the top of the table, close to Yan Huainan. After the banquet was set up, Chu Xiu had begun to eat before Yan Huainan could say anything. While eating, Chu Xiu nodded. Where had the Divine Martial Gate found this chef? His cooking skills were not bad. Suppressing his anger, Yan Huainan cleared his throat, raised his cup, and said, "Thank you everyone for coming to the Millennium celebration of my Divine Force sect. I'm very grateful. This cup is for all of you." After exchanging some pleasantries and drinking a few glasses of wine, some of the small forces present came forward one by one, presenting their gifts and complimenting them. At this moment, Chu Xiu winked at Tangya. Tangya immediately took out a small notebook and took notes as he muttered. The Zhang family of Linzhou sent a pair of 1,000-year-old water jades. TSK not bad. They are quite rich and fat. And the Divine Wind sect of Chonglin County sent a fire-repelling pearl. TSK, this sect is a bit stingy. Their name sounds like the Divine Martial Gate, but they are so stingy. Are you jealous? When the people present saw what Chu Xiu had done, their expressions changed suddenly. Chapter 688. The atmosphere in the Divine Force sect was very strange. On one side, people were happily presenting their gifts, while on the other side, Tangya was holding a pen and recording. Gradually, everyone present felt that something was wrong. What did Chu Xiu mean by this? Was he going to settle the score later? Therefore, the sects who had originally planned to present their gifts to leave a good impression in front of Yan Huainan all stopped in their tracks. The scene suddenly became very strange. The people who were about to congratulate Yan Huainan were all stunned. There was silence, and the scene was very awkward. Yan Huainan looked at Chu Xiu and shouted angrily, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean?" Chu Xiu was surprised. "What did I do?" "Sect Master Yan, please continue. Don't worry about me. I'm just learning from you. The extravagance of the Divine Martial Sect is not bad. One day, my Jinwu Hall will also hold a celebration of 100 days or 1,000 days. Then I will ask everyone to come and see if my Jinwu Hall's reputation is big enough for so many people to come and give gifts." Looking at the people present, Chu Xiu smiled coldly and said, "Everyone, I remember all the gifts you have given me. You have given the Divine Force sect such a big gift. If I receive less than the Divine Force sect's gift, it means that you look down on me, Chu Xiu." As soon as he said this, the expressions of everyone present changed. Some of the people who had not had time to present their gifts were relieved. However, as soon as he said this, they were even more afraid to step forward. Yan Huainan gripped the armrest of his chair tightly. The dragon chair, which was made of fine steel, had deep marks on it. It was obvious that he was suppressing his anger. He did not want to fight with Chu Xiu. One of the reasons was that he did not have the confidence to defeat Chu Xiu. After stepping into the martial arts master realm, Chu Xiu had killed Feng Datong, defeated Taoist Fuyun, and defeated Su Xing, the first seat of the Dharma Hall of the Great Light Temple. His power was unparalleled. Although Yan Huainan was also ranked on the Fengyan list, he was not confident that he could face Su Xing. It was the same for him to face Chu Xiu, who had defeated Su Xing. Of course, this was only part of the reason. All martial artists had their own pride. Before they really fought, Yan Huainan only felt that he was not confident that he could defeat Chu Xiu. However, he did not think that he was inferior to Chu Xiu. The real reason was that he was hesitating whether he should agree to Taoist Wuyang's request to join the subduing martial hall. If he joined, then the conflict between him and Chu Xiu would become an internal conflict, and everything would be fine. If he were to shed all pretenses of cordiality with Chu Xiu and attack him now, then there would be no room for reconciliation. Yan Huainan was quite patient. Faced with Chu Xiu's attitude of deliberately stirring up trouble, he actually put up with it. In the end he said coldly, "Serve the dishes." When Yan Huainan said that the dishes would be served, he meant it. It was a big dish that the Divine Force School had prepared for this celebration. The people from other forces had generously sent their congratulatory gifts, so the Divine Force School could not be too stingy. Therefore, Yan Huainan deliberately spent a lot of money to buy a fierce beast, red eagle, that had been killed by someone from the southern barbarian land, as the main dish. It was said that fierce beasts were quite common in ancient times. However, after the great calamity of ancient times, the fierce beasts left in Jianghu were very rare. Only in places like the 100,000 mountains of West Chu or the southern barbarian land, which were rarely visited by people, would there be some. Most of them were alone. When they were discovered, they would immediately be attacked by groups of people, treating them as a moving treasure house. However, that was indeed the case. Almost every part of these vicious beasts was a treasure. Even their flesh contained extremely strong yuan qi. Eating them would be of some help to one's cultivation. Although it was not too much, it was at least better than some low-level spirit herbs. This kind of thing was very expensive, and ordinary small forces could not buy it even if they wanted to. This time, it was the Divine Force School's Millennium celebration that they had prepared such a thing to keep up appearances. Yan Huainan already hated Chu Xiu to the extreme. The sooner he finished the meal, the sooner he could get out of here. He did not want to see Chu Xiu again. One after another, the maids walked to the crowd with exquisite dishes. After they put down the dishes and opened the lids, a strong fragrance instantly wafted over, which was very tempting. The hands of the maid in front of Chu Xiu were trembling slightly. Yan Huainan looked at the maid with dissatisfaction, but he did not say anything. These maids were just ordinary people. It would be fine if they were facing other people, but it was understandable that they were a little scared when facing a great devil like Chu Xiu, who had killed people like flies and was famous in Jianghu. Chu Xiu looked at the red eagle's meat in front of him. It was as red as fire. He did not know whether it was because it was originally red or because it was cooked, but the fragrance was very tempting. The others could not bear it any longer, and they started to eat. When Chu Xiu picked up a piece of meat with his chopsticks and was about to eat it, a strange look flashed in his eyes. However, he acted as if he did not notice it, and he directly threw the meat into his mouth. Mei Qinglian, who was at the side, also wanted to pick up the meat, but Chu Xiu blocked her with his chopsticks. Mei Qinglian raised her brows and said, "It's not a good habit to eat alone." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "This meat is not delicious." Mei Qinglian looked at the fragrant red eagle's meat in front of her, and she wore a look that said, "Do you think I'm an idiot? If it's not delicious, why are you enjoying it so much?" However, Mei Qinglian reacted soon after. She frowned and put down her chopsticks. When Chu Xiu had finished the red eagle's meat, a woman's voice suddenly rang out, filled with deep hatred. "Chu Xiu, you finally have this day. You killed my lover, and I've waited for many years for this opportunity. Brother Yu, can you see that I've finally avenged you today?" Everyone present was stunned, and they looked outside. They did not know when a skinny woman with a twisted and hateful face was standing there, looking at Chu Xiu with a pleased expression. Yan Huainan's expression suddenly changed, and he shouted angrily, "Nonsense! Go back! And what are you doing? Didn't I ask you to watch the young mistress? Who let her out?" Hearing Yan Huainan's words, everyone present suddenly realized that this woman was Yan Tingting. In the past, Yan Tingting would always appear in the northern Yan martial arts world. However, ever since she brought people to kill Chu Xiu in eastern Qi, she had been killed by Chu Xiu, and she had almost died at Chu Xiu's hands. Since then, she had never appeared in the Jianghu, so the warriors present did not recognize her. Of course, the most important thing was that the current Yan Tingting was very different from the Yan Tingting of the past. In the past, Yan Tingting had been a beauty, but now she was thin, and her cheekbones were protruding. Coupled with her hateful expression, she looked somewhat terrifying and twisted. Yan Tingting said coldly, "Father, you don't have to worry about Chu Xiu's revenge. I've already put the moon-worshipping cult's broken intestines goo in the red eagle's meat he ate. The broken intestines goo will devour all of Chu Xiu's qi and blood within 2 hours, and his intestines will rot and he will die." Hearing this, everyone's expression changed abruptly. With the rise of the moon-worshipping cult, all kinds of news about the moon-worshipping cult had spread to the Jianghu, especially the wind-sweeping tower, where all the information about the moon-worshipping cult had been snatched up. The moon-worshipping cult was good at many things. Not only were they good at demonic arts and secret techniques, but they were also famous for their poisonous insects. The broken intestines goo was one of the most famous poisonous insects in the moon-worshipping cult. Even a martial Dao grandmaster could not resist it, and they would be poisoned to death within 2 hours. Of course, the broken intestines goo also had a fatal weakness, and that was that it was extremely fragile. In the outside world, it was as fragile as an ordinary insect, and it had to enter the human body to take effect. During this period of time, Chu Xiu had killed many people in the northern Yin martial arts world. It could be said that he was extremely awe-inspiring, but in the end, he died in the hands of a woman. Everyone looked at Chu Xiu with a hint of schadenfreude, and the way they looked at Yin Tingting was even more strange. When this woman went crazy, she did not care about anything. She had poisoned Chu Xiu to kill him, but in reality, she had also destroyed the Divine Force Gate. Yin Huainan pointed at Yin Tingting, and he was so angry that his hand was trembling. Was Chu Xiu that easy to kill? Was he someone who could be killed so easily? It was possible to kill Chu Xiu. If Yin Huainan had the ability, he could have killed Chu Xiu in the name of the righteous path in public, and then asked for help from the righteous path sects like the Great Light Temple. Yin Huainan would have immediately become the hero of the northern Yin martial arts world, and he would have been protected by the righteous path. But now, Chu Xiu had been killed by such a despicable method as poison. Usually, it was those shameless people of the demonic path who would do such a thing. Why would the people of the righteous path do such a thing? Although the person who had poisoned Chu Xiu was not Yin Huainan, what was the difference between Yin Tingting and Yin Huainan? Once such a thing happened, although there would definitely be people who would applaud the death of Chu Xiu, there would definitely be people who would despise Yin Huainan for his despicable methods. Moreover, with Chu Xiu dead, the Yinma clan would definitely be enraged. Chu Xiu was the most outstanding martial art practitioner of the younger generation of the Yinma clan, and he was even considered the successor of the Yinma clan. However, he had died in such a despicable method. If the Yinma clan did not avenge Chu Xiu, how could they show their face? Moreover, Chu Xiu was now the governor of the Zhenwu clan, and he represented the imperial court. In the end, he was killed by poison in public after coming to the Divine Force Gate. Did the Divine Force Gate still have any respect for the imperial court? Yin Huainan was not the only one who could think of these consequences. Everyone present could think of them as well. Everyone could not help but look at Yin Huainan and Chu Xiu with a hint of sympathy. Madmen were scary, but a madwoman was even scarier than a madman. One should never underestimate a woman's hatred. When Yin Tingting went crazy, not only would she want Chu Xiu's life, but she would also want Yin Huainan's life. However, at this moment, no one realized that Chu Xiu's expression was very calm. The same was true for Mei Qinglian, who was beside him. It was as if they did not know that he had been poisoned by the intestine-severing goo. Looking at Yin Tingting, Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "What is love in the world? It makes people promise to live and die for it. I did not expect that your love for that good-for-nothing of the Yu clan would be so deep. It was my fault that you were separated by life and death. I do not kill women easily. Fine, I will make an exception today and send you to see him." Chapter 689. What is love in the world? It makes people promise to live and die for it. Everyone present looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look in their eyes, especially a few women. They looked at Chu Xiu with a hazy look in their eyes. Chu Xiu, a murderous devil, could actually write such a poignant poem? However, the majority of the women present were maids of the divine martial sect. Although they had heard of Chu Xiu's various legends, how could a handsome young master, who was able to compose such a poem, be the sinister demon they had imagined? There must be some misunderstanding. It must be. However, after that, everyone present suddenly felt that something was amiss. Looking at Chu Xiu's appearance, why did he seem to be fearless? Yin Tingting looked at Chu Xiu in disbelief. Why haven't you acted up yet? Could it be that the intestine-severing goo is fake? The moon-worshipping cult's goo were so powerful, but they were also extremely expensive. Moreover, some goo were hard to buy even with money. All these years, Yen Tingting had spent a lot of effort to get some intestine-severing goo. Could it be fake? Chu Xiu's hand moved. His arm instantly bulged. It was densely packed, as if something was twisting inside. It was extremely horrifying and disgusting. Using the tip of his finger, he sliced open his arm. In an instant, over 10 white and plump bugs, each as thick as a pinky finger, were squeezed out from Chu Xiu's arm. Only the heavens knew how Yen Tingting had hidden these goo bugs in the scarlet eagle's meat. Casually touching his arm, a faint demonic aura instantly healed the wounds on Chu Xiu's arm. This was the effect of the eternal demon pill. Its recovery ability was simply abnormal. Taking a step forward, Chu Xiu casually stomped the intestine-severing goo into meat paste. He said indifferently, "The goo worms are real. However, the moon-worshipping cult and my Inma clan are both demonic sections. Yen Tingting, are you still so naive, or should I say foolish?" Using moon-worshipping cult's goo worms to deal with Chu Xiu was indeed a very stupid thing to do. The glazed golden silk goo in Chu Xiu's body was originally a masterpiece of moon-worshipping cult's goo refinement technique. It could be said to be one of the strongest goo worms refined by moon-worshipping cult in history. It was simply an existence that could not be replicated. Any moon-worshipping cult's goo worms or poisonous creatures would be restrained by the glazed golden silk goo. At this time, it was possible to say that Chu Xiu was immune to all poisons. Seeing the broken intestine goo, which she had worked so hard to get, being easily trampled to death by Chu Xiu, Yen Tingting broke down. She murmured, "Impossible. Impossible. Nothing is impossible in this world. Since you are so sad, I will send you to find your brother Yu and help you reunite." Taking a step forward, Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by a monstrous demonic flame. A cold aura instantly enveloped the whole divine force gate. Even the sunny sky became gloomy, as if it was covered by dark clouds. Chu Xiu said that he did not kill women. In fact, he rarely killed women. Chu Xiu was not talking nonsense about this. Of course, the premise was that the woman did not cross his bottom line. Otherwise, there would be no distinction between men and women in Chu Xiu's place. There would only be a quick death or a slow death. At this time, the women who were still obsessed with Chu Xiu's poem truly believed that the man in front of them was not a worldly gentleman in their imagination, but a real devil. Yen Huainan stood in front of Chu Xiu and shouted in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, I will give you an explanation for this. Tingting is still young and ignorant. Please let her go this time." Even if Yen Tingting had gone overboard and almost harmed the whole divine force gate, she was still his daughter, the daughter he loved the most. He could not let his daughter be killed by Chu Xiu in front of him. Would he still be a man if he did that? Chu Xiu squinted at Yen Huainan and said in a serious tone, "Do you know what it means to cheat your father, Sect Master Yen?" Yen Huainan frowned. He had never heard of this word, but his intuition told him that it was not a good word. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Actually, I came to the divine force gate to cause trouble. But Sect Master Yen, you are really good at enduring until now. I, Chu Xiu, am not an unreasonable person. Since I couldn't find any evidence to blackmail you, I was going to leave after eating. But your precious daughter gave me a good reason to attack. If someone wants to kill me, I will kill him. As for an explanation, I am afraid you can't afford it, Sect Master Yen." As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu took a step forward. The demon energy around him soared into the sky and suddenly gathered in the heavenly demon dance in his hand. The pitch-black demon energy seemed to have condensed into a solid form. When the saber slashed down, the demon energy covered the sky and the sun, and its power was extremely powerful. He had made an agreement with Su Du that he would not attack the Northern Yen forces for the time being. But he had also said that if someone wanted to court death, then they should not blame him for being cruel and merciless. Yen Huainan did not want to court death, but it was a pity that he had a daughter who wanted to court death. Also, he was not cruel enough, so he did not dare and would not kill his family in the name of justice. Facing Chu Xiu's extremely powerful demon saber, Yen Huainan shouted. He also straightened his palm as a saber, and the upstanding energy circulated in his hands. 2 saber lights slashed down, but they were not able to offset the power of Chu Xiu's saber, and were directly shattered. However, at this moment, Yan Huainan used his fingers as a sword, and whistling sword energy kept shooting out, bombarding on Chu Xiu's saber and weakening its power. In the end, Yan Huainan punched down. The upstanding energy condensed in one point and exploded with a loud bang, shattering Chu Xiu's saber. However, Yan Huainan himself also retreated several steps, and a hint of astonishment appeared in his eyes. This Chu Xiu is so powerful. Yan Huainan's nickname was Magical Transformation, which came from his martial arts. It could be said that his martial arts were ever-changing and all-encompassing. Unlike Chu Xiu, who was proficient in all kinds of cultivation methods, Yan Huainan was not proficient in them. However, his martial arts imitated all kinds of martial arts, and the number of imitations was more than Chu Xiu's. It would not be an exaggeration to say that his martial arts were ever-changing. However, this kind of martial arts had a fatal flaw, which was that they had more than enough variations, but they were not strong enough. Although Yan Huainan had entered the martial arts master realm more than 10 years earlier than Chu Xiu, he was still not as strong as Chu Xiu in terms of strength. His upstanding energy condensed into an arrow, and the upstanding energy shot out like a flowing light, whistling toward Chu Xiu. Seeing this arrow, a mocking smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. He also condensed his bow into an arrow, but it was not the essential qi that had condensed into an arrow, but the vital spirit. An arrow shot out toward Yan Huainan. Both sides shot arrows at each other, and neither of them chose to block. Instead, they went straight for each other. Yan Huainan's arrow arrived first. Almost when the arrow was about to reach him and the upstanding energy was about to explode, Chu Xiu moved several feet to the other side gently. It was this distance of several feet that caused Yan Huainan's arrow to miss its target, and a huge pit was blasted in the ground. On the other side, Yan Huainan was also trying to dodge Chu Xiu's soul-extinguishing arrow. However, he was horrified to find that no matter where he tried to dodge to, he could not escape from the soul-extinguishing arrow. In the end, he could only perform a seal with both hands, and a golden radiance bloomed behind his head. It seemed to have formed a barrier that blocked the power of the soul-extinguishing arrow. However, a bit of the remaining power still blasted into Yan Huainan's body, causing him to groan and retreat quickly. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. At the moment, he was a little surprised. Yan Huainan even knew a primordial spirit secret technique? More accurately speaking, what Yan Huainan knew was not a primordial spirit secret technique, but a defensive technique of the primordial spirit secret technique. Even so, this was still very rare. In the past, when Chu Xiu's opponents faced a primordial spirit secret technique like the soul-extinguishing arrow, most of them could only use the power of their vital energy and blood to resist it. There were very few warriors like Yan Huainan who practiced a defensive technique of the primordial spirit. After all, only a small portion of the people in the Jianghu were good at primordial spirit secret techniques, like the soul-extinguishing arrow. Unless one had an enemy who was an expert who was good at primordial spirit secret techniques, most people would not practice such useless martial arts, as they might not be able to use it for the rest of their lives. Sect Master Yan, you know quite a lot. I wonder if you can withstand this move of mine. A dense killing intent bloomed in Chu Xiu's eyes. This time he really wanted to kill Yan Huainan. In the beginning, Chu Xiu did not want to kill Yan Huainan. After all, the Divine Martial Sect's foundation was much stronger than the giant spirit gangs. Yan Huainan was an expert on the Wind Cloud list, and his strength was not something that Fang Datong could compare to. In fact, Yan Huainan's ranking on the Wind Cloud list was just one rank behind Chu Xiu. This time, he had come purely to find trouble with Taoist Wu Wang, and ruin the Divine Martial Sect's plan to join his faction. However, who would have thought that something like this would happen? This gave Chu Xiu a very good reason, a reason to destroy the Divine Martial Sect. Amidst the boundless demonic aura, a murderous aura soared into the sky. As Chu Xiu slashed down with his saber, the demonic aura and murderous aura around him merged into one, forming an evil, blackish-red color. Yan Huainan knew that he was no match for Chu Xiu in terms of strength and foundation. Therefore, his figure changed unpredictably. He used fists, palms, sabers, swords, finger techniques, body techniques, and all kinds of martial arts techniques with ease. It could be said that he was ever-changing, and he managed to completely block Chu Xiu's attacks. However, little did he know that the more Yan Huainan fought, the more tired he felt. When Chu Xiu's simple saber slashed down, Yan Huainan had to use several moves to block and neutralize it. He could not even make a mistake with a single move. Otherwise, even if he did not die, he would be severely injured. Looking at Yan Huainan, who was jumping up and down in front of him, Chu Xiu withdrew his saber and retreated. Everyone present was taken aback, wondering if Yan Huainan was going to stop fighting. However, Chu Xiu merely weaved seals with both hands. In an instant, a powerful Buddhist light burst forth, enveloping the entire sky above the divine martial sect. The Vairocana Buddha's shadow condensed behind Chu Xiu. However, at the moment he was covered in demonic flames, which combined with the Buddhist light, giving off an evil sense of beauty. However, Chu Xiu did not make a move right away. Instead, he said to Mei Qinglian, "Do it. Hold him back." Mei Qinglian stretched, revealing her graceful figure. It seemed that Chu Xiu really wanted to kill. Otherwise, he would not have asked her to make a move. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.